There we are. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm so sorry I'm late. It is 3:13. I am a little later than I usually am, but we are back and we are talking about your home buyer budget today and how to prepare yourself and make sure that you are ready to buy that home. Sorry, I can hear myself echoing. I wanted to make sure it was working and I ended up opening up the video on my phone. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today. So first off, let's talk about, oops, we went too far. We're going to talk about assessing your finances. So the very first thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at your finances and everything that you're paying for right now. First, we're going to look at our income, our expenses, and our debt. We're going to figure out essentially how much money we have left over. Now, if you're renting, if you are already paying a mortgage, you can obviously factor that in, or you can take that out, what you're paying for your rent currently or your current mortgage, so that we can figure out what, based on just your utilities, your debts, your every month expenses that you have already, what your available budget is. Now, the thing that I always stress for people to do is to figure out their DTI. Your DTI is going to be extremely important when you're talking to lenders, because typically, not with every program, but with a lot of programs, they're going to want to see you under 43%. And what they're going to do is they're going to take your income and they're going to subtract all of your expenses. Now, let's say that right now you have a $500 car payment. For easy math, we're going to say you have a $500 car payment and you pay every month $1,000 on that car payment. Well, they're not going to factor in $1,000. They're going to factor in, typically, unless you tell them and make sure that you're very explicit that you are going to continue to do that, they're going to factor in what your minimum payment is. So that means credit cards, student loan debts, any medical debts, any sort of debt that is outstanding on your credit report right now that you have a monthly minimum payment on, they're going to include that. They're not going to include things like your cell phone bill. They're not going to include things like storage unit bills, daycare, things like that. We're going to get to that further on. Actually, we're going to get to it pretty quickly here. We're going to talk about setting your home budget. There are a couple things on top of your monthly expenses that you may already be paying that I want you to consider. If you're moving into a maybe a master community, and not even, not even a master community. Sorry, something's wrong with my voice. Not even a master community, but most neighborhoods nowadays, especially in DFW, are in a lot of people call them HOAs, but they're more technically defined as a property owners association. So you'll hear POAs a lot more commonly than HOAs. But a POA could affect what you're paying monthly. Some of those POAs have you pay a couple $100s a month. Some are a couple $100s a year, a quarter, semi-annually. Each HOA or POA is different, but if you're moving into a neighborhood that does have a POA, it's something to consider. And if that is a hard line for you, that you don't want to add that into your budget, you need to tell us so that we can make sure we're not including homes in an HOA or a POA neighborhood, because it's not something that you want to pay for. Another thing that you want to think about, if you're moving into a newer area, maybe it is not new construction, but it was newer construction here in the last couple of years, you may be looking at areas that you'll hear PIDs and MUDs a lot. Those are public improvement districts and municipal utility districts. And those do pay out for years. So that does roll over to the new owner. So if you purchase a home that maybe was built 2 or 3 years ago, if they're in a MUD or a PID, you will be paying that expense as well. So that's something to think about, not only in your monthly expenses, but also thinking about your resale value. If you're only going to be in that home a few years, how long is that PID intact for? How long do we have to pay that MUD? How is that going to affect my resale value when I'm trying to sell this home in a few years? Just little things to consider. Another big thing to consider, which we're seeing more and more of lately, are solar panels. Some solar panels, some people will buy their solar panels, I can't talk today. Solar panels outright, good for them. Absolutely love that journey for you. But most people are financing that. And you may be purchasing a home where they still owe $20,000, $30,000 on solar panels. And that could increase your monthly payment, depending on what they've structured in that agreement, by a couple $100s or even more. Maybe they've structured it to pay it off quicker. And so those payments are extremely high. So that is something also to consider. We love solar panels. It is energy efficient, but may not be cost efficient in your monthly affordability right now. So it is something that you want to consider as an additional cost that may come up depending on the area that you're in or depending on the house that you're looking at specifically. Let's talk about your monthly costs. Now, these are things, this is your monthly cost in your sales price. When we're talking about your new home, we're not talking about your expenses. We're not talking about childcare, things like that. This is simply what you're paying for your home. If you are not escrowing your taxes and your insurance, then you're just paying your principal and interest, and you will be paying that tax and insurance bill separately. If you are escrowing, you'll see a lot of times you'll hear them refer to it as your PITI. And that is your principal, your interest, your taxes, and your insurance. And that combined payment is what your mortgage payment would be each month. The great thing about escrowing is that if you decide to escrow in those taxes and insurance, then when that tax bill comes up, when it's time to make that annual insurance payment, you have an escrow account with the funds there. Every year is not the same. That rate on your insurance may fluctuate. The tax bill that you have that year may fluctuate based on your home value. But if you're escrowing it, it does give you a good head start. So when end of year comes or beginning of year comes and you start getting those bills, you're not having to scramble and get things together. So these are things that you need to be expecting on top of just your normal monthly payment. Next thing we're going to talk about is considering your sales price. So here are some determining factors for your sales price and determining factors when you're talking about your pre-approval with your lender. They're going to be looking at your income. They're going to be looking at your credit scores and your debt. All of these things are going to help determine your DTI that we talked about earlier. Your DTI is going to be extremely important when it comes to your lender because it's going to tell them where your affordability is month to month. Things your lender is not going to consider are things like childcare. They're not going to consider memberships. Maybe you're a member at a golf club, a country club, a gym membership. They are not going to consider those things. Subscriptions. I know if you were anything like our house, we all have a subscription to everything. HBO, Amazon, Paramount. Every channel has a subscription nowadays. AMC, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN, all of it. They're not considering those. So if you're paying $200 a month for your combined subscriptions with Kindle and Audible and all of that stuff, they aren't considering that. That's something that you need to factor in yourself. They are also not factoring in your car insurance, your auto insurance. Maybe you have a boat, maybe you have a car, you have toys, motorcycles, things like that, RVs. Those are typically things that are not being considered. It is not considered a debt like a credit card debt, a student loan debt is, so it is not typically factored in. And then your other monthly expenses that you pay for. Went blank there for a second. Water, gas, trash. Some people are still paying for cable. Obviously, your internet and your phone bill is going to be a must-have in our day and age. Most of us are working from home, so having good internet is not just a personal requirement because we're all online so much, but it is a business requirement. I need to have good high-speed internet, and if I move out into the middle of nowhere, am I going to have high-speed internet, or am I going to feel like I'm on dial-up? But again, that's talking about location. I got a rabbit hole there. But these are things that they're not really going to consider, but these are things that you want to consider when you're determining what that sales price is going to be. You want to make sure that you're including these factors and making sure that when you're including these in your monthly payments, you talk about this with your lender, because most of the time they're just going to assume based on your debts that this is what you're paying. And I like to assume that every lender is going to dig deep and ask those extra questions, but I want you to raise your hand and be like, hey, what about all my memberships? What about all my subscriptions? I pay $300 a month in subscriptions and memberships and extra little things, and I want to continue to pay for those. I don't want to have to give those up when I move into my home. All right, we're going to talk about our expenses, and we're going to kind of move more into that. I know I kind of dove into that early, but what are you paying for month to month? That could actually change your monthly affordability threshold, because last thing you want is to move in and have to give up all of your luxuries. I don't want to have to move into my home and give up on, my Hulu and my Netflix and my Barnes and Noble bill that I have every single month. There are things that I know that I like to do that are part of my lifestyle that I want to be sure that I can continue to do. So when I'm talking with a lender, I want to be sure that they're aware. Here are things in your, Here are things that are not being considered in your monthly budget when you're talking about pre-approval with your lender. Things that you need to be considering when you're adding up all of your expenses. This needs to be included. Children, I know that's super broad because we spend most of our money on our children because we love them so much and because childcare is expensive, but they're not looking at childcare. I know for a lot of families out there, childcare is a huge portion of your budget. That is not included in your DTI. They're not factoring that in. So you need to be sure that you're factoring that in. If it's $1,500 a month for childcare and they haven't factored that in and they say that you've been pre-approved for a $4,000 mortgage, you need to be sure you're factoring that in. Maybe you can get pre-approved for a $4,000 mortgage, but based on the fact that you need to pay $1,500 in childcare and your oldest is about to go into summer and you need to pay for ESD or extended school day or summer camps, that's something also to consider. If your child is in any sort of therapies, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapies, anything like that, that adds up to your monthly expenses, that's not being factored in unless it is a debt. Say they have a medical debt that's outstanding, that could be factored in if the debt is in your name. And then there is a minimum payment attached to it and they have that set up. But in most instances, I would take it upon yourself to make sure that this is factored into your budget. And then our favorite, sports, any sort of outside activities, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. And I think that may fall also into the summer camps category, but I wanted to make sure we include it because those do get pricey. And our children are our world and we want to make sure that they have everything, but we also want to make sure that we're factoring this in when we're figuring out our budget for the next home. Utilities. This is where we're going to get into more of the streaming services. So we've got our basic necessities that we're always going to have, and that you're probably should be already, unless you're off the grid. And then if you are, I'm not sure how you're watching this, but if you're off the grid, then these will be new. But if you are on the grid, then you're paying for water, gas, electric, sewage, septic, depending on the area, trash. If you have a pool, you're probably paying pool maintenance. Like we said, internet and phone bills are a must nowadays. Everybody's got to have a smartphone and everybody's got to have internet for what they do. We've all discovered since the pandemic that we can all work from home. So high-speed internet, regardless of where you live, is a must. So that's something we need to consider as well. And finally, our streaming services and our cable. I know that adds up. I know. We just fired Amazon Prime in our house. So yes, I know the streaming services can add up, but these are things you need to be considering. If you're already paying these, then it's already factored into your budget. You already know that it's there. But if it's not something that you've paid before, maybe this is your first time home purchase and you're going from living with mom and dad, or living in your college dorms or college apartments where some of that stuff is included, to moving into your very first home. These are things that you need to expect and you need to factor in. And if you don't know the average, you can Google the average for some of these in your area and for zip codes. So if it's something you're not certain of, there are ways to figure out what that amount's going to look like for you. And our final subject which is miscellaneous. This is anything that is really additional that you spend money on: charities, memberships. Maybe you are a car enthusiast and you buy lots of cars. Maybe you are building your cars or motorcycles, or you are planning on buying a boat. Anything like this that you spend monthly expenses on. Maybe you have a boat and you have to pay for your boat hangar and you have to pay for that sort of storage and your insurance on that. So there are a lot of other things that really what I'm trying to get to is if you pay for it every month, you need to be factoring it in, because we need to make sure that we're not overspending when we get that pre-approval, because sometimes you can be pre-approved for more than you would like, not more than you'd like to. We all like a bigger, more beautiful house, but more than your pocketbook can afford to, based on the lifestyle that you're living now. And we want to make sure that you're living in a home that you love and can call home and are proud to go home to, but also something that doesn't make it where you need to give up those luxuries and those extra things that you can afford in your life now. So just because you're upgrading and moving on to that next bigger and better house does not mean that you have to give all these things up. We just want to help show you how to put that budget together and make sure that you're accounting for everything. Because I would hate for things to fall through the cracks, and there are things I've missed, I'm absolutely sure, but I want to make sure we've covered as much as we can. All right. Last thing that I want to talk about is your savings and pre-approval. So we're going to start by prioritizing your expenses. Get rid of things that are not a must-have. If you have Audible and you haven't used it in 3 months, cut it out. Maybe you haven't logged into Paramount, you have Paramount Plus and AMC and Discovery, and you don't even use those anymore. Start filtering through some of the subscriptions that can help with your monthly affordability. Now, I know a $5, $9, $12 subscription here and there isn't going to change your affordability much, but it could help you when you're saving to not have this money floating away to something that you don't need anymore. Putting that money into something that would be more useful and saving that away towards your down payment. And when you feel like it's time that you're ready, we're going to get you talking to local lenders and we're going to figure out what steps you need to take. Maybe your savings is in place and your credit needs a little work. Maybe your credit and savings is in place and we just need to figure out what program is right for you. Maybe you're closer to that goal than you think that you actually are. So let's talk a little bit more about down payment and closing costs. We talk a lot about these, but I wanted you to see a little overview of the programs that there are. For conventional, it's a wide range, especially if it's a secondary property, which is why you see it go up there so much on down payment. Typically, we're seeing clients in the 3 to 5% range, but if it is a secondary property, you're looking at a higher down payment. FHA, about 3.5%, sometimes more, but 3.5% is typically where we see people. USDA and VA are always everybody's favorite because they are 0% down. Now, obviously, you cannot qualify for a VA loan if you are not a veteran, and you cannot qualify for a USDA loan if you are not in a USDA approved area, which is more and more limited these days. There's less and less areas that are USDA approved. So if that's something that you're thinking of, let us know and we can find out if the area that you're looking at is USDA approved. But a lot of DFW is not. We're just not in the USDA area. Closing costs can range depending on lender, sorry, my brain went blank. Lender fees, you'll have, sorry, my brain went totally blank. I've been talking for so long, my brain went blank. Preliminary taxes and things like that that will add up to your closing costs. And it usually ranges somewhere from 2 to 6% is the average typically of what we see. So it can range. If you want a more specific number, I would definitely talk to a lender because they could definitely tell you where their lender fees are, how much it costs for them to pay for or for you to pay for an appraisal, and all of those other little extra fees that go into that. All right, guys, that is everything I have. Let me make sure we don't have any questions. Okay, I see no comments. If y'all think of any questions, please let me know. As always, thank you so much for everybody that does tune in every single week. If you have questions for the team, feel free to reach out to us by email at info@reynoldshometeam.com. You can also visit our website if you just want to check it out, get to know the team a little bit and kind of see what we do and what programs we offer. Or you can reach out to us directly through social media or calling us, texting us, really whatever is easier for you. That's all I have, guys. We'll see you here next week. Bye.